Jupiter Broadcasting presents this show in mega stereo sound. This episode brought to you by the extreme folks over at GoDaddy.com.
This week on the Linux Action Show, we've got the perfect gift for mom this year. Bacon. We invite Jono Bacon on the show to respond to some of our issues with the latest Ubuntu release. Plus not much more. All this week on the Linux Action Show. And welcome to the Linux Action Show, Season 16, Episode 8. My name is Brian. That guy is Chris.
Hey there, Brian.
Hey there, Chris. This is... I'm going to stop you.
All right.
You were going to say something runs Linux. I'm going to stop you.
Oh.
You can't tell anyone what runs Linux.
No, how come, Brian?
Because this is a very special episode of the Linux Action Show.
Hey, Brian.
It's a little bit shorter.
Happy
not
Mother's
too much.
Day.
It's a Mother's Day episode.
It's a Mother's Day.
It's a Mother's Day episode.
We record the Linux Action Show on Mother's Day, but we didn't want you guys to be without an episode. So we decided to do something a little epic for you.
Yeah.
We got together early in the week so that way we can make an episode, and we got Jono Bacon on the line to defend Unity and defend Ubuntu 11.04.
Because we were incredibly harsh on it.
We were a little rough.
We were kind of jerkies about it.
Now, we should warn you that
Feel bad
coming
about
up in the interview with Jono, at a certain point in the interview, Jono's mixer starts going out on him. I have it on a reliable source, Brian. Jono's mixer runs Windows XP embedded, and it was having a USB driver issue.
Highly likely.
Yeah.
Highly likely. I think it's funny. So this is our second episode in a row with some sort of audio issue, but we sound great.
We were great.
Yeah, we sound great.
Hopefully.
At least that's a step in the right direction. Jono, however, a little bit crap. Jono sounds like a little bit crap, but I'm not going to blame Jono. I'm just going to blame Jono's choice in mixers.
It's a good interview, though, and he's got some good responses to some of our points. But you know, B-Man, before we go on, we should say holler to our buddies over at GoDaddy.com.
Hi, Danica Packard.
Yep, I contacted GoDaddy and I said, guys, look, we're recording early this week. We got to have Danica.
Yeah. Please put Danica up on the webpage on Wednesday afternoon.
So their web guy, who normally only works on Sundays, to change that for us. Well, that's not the right shot, Brian. That's Jono's shot. Their web guy came in on a special day just for the Linux Action Show, and he said, make sure, all right, guys, I'm coming in, but earn us some money here. You got to use our code Linux. Save 10% or Linux 20.
How fancy is that?
I mean, make it worth that guy's time to come in to put Danica up on the front page.
Come on. That guy is a hero. That man is a hero.
Not that shot. Although I could put Danica in a box. Wait, that's your shot. Oh, I put Twitter in a box.
That's Twitter in a box right there.
People who are watching, people listening to the audio version
They have no idea what's happening. I feel terrible for our audio listeners right now.
I'm sorry,
It's just atrocious.
All right, B-Man, what do you say? Let's go chat with Jono.
Okay.
It's time for bacon.
All right, so last week we were incredibly harsh on Ubuntu 11.04. I'm not sure how many people actually saw our official Ubuntu Natty review.
It was a little rough.
We had some audio problems when we were down at Linux Fest, and so here's the quick recap of it. A, we absolutely hated Ubuntu 11.04. B, it was a pretty good release, but Unity made us really, really angry, and we didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
And C, we actually just kept harshing on Unity over and over again, actually.
Well, kind of. We had some points. And
we had points, but I mean, overall, I think we just felt that we didn't like where it was going.
Yeah.
And
so we thought, why not get...
we need to get someone from Canonical on the horn to defend Unity, to defend Ubuntu, to talk to us about it. And who better than Jono Bacon?
Hey there, Oh, hi there, Jono. Welcome back to the show, Jono.
He's just sitting over there. He's like, man, I'm bored already of this.
Man, is it over yet?
It's pretty brutal, isn't it? All right, so here it is. Here we are. Not even a week later. It hasn't been out for even a full week. The entire interglobes are all of tizzy about Unity and Ubuntu 11.04, and people are like, oh, I'm going to ditch it. I'm going to KDE now. And, no, GNOME 3 forever. And everyone's all upset. Some people think it's the best thing since sliced bread. I want to hear what your thoughts are on the 11.04 release, in particular Unity, since that's what everyone wants to talk about.
Right. So I think 11.04 is a really important release for Ubuntu, and it's a desktop Linux in general. And the reason for that is that Linux distributions for a long time now, what we've been doing is we've been taking software that is developed upstream and we've been taking that innovation and packaging it in a really easy to use system, right? And that's basically how. For a period of time, I think it was reasonable to say that some upstreams weren't innovating quite so much, and
reasonable.
The period of I think the period of innovation, the period of change was happening at a slower pace than I think any of us would have preferably wanted to see.
Right.
And then things really started changing. KDE released KDE4, some time ago. The discussions around GNOME 3.0 started happening, and Unity started happening as well. Why I think Unity is important for Ubuntu is I think that our general goal here is to take free software to the masses. Okay, so we want the mums and dads of the world using it. We want not just Linux enthusiasts and tech enthusiasts using it. We want millions and millions of regular people using it as well. And people often talk about getting over the chasm. And we identified that there's
over the what now?
Over the chasm.
The chasm.
Deal with
the
this
chasm. Who are these people talking about getting over this chasm? I have not been hearing this.
Those people who are unfamiliar with this, I wonder if I can draw.
That'd be great.
Imagine you have a graph. Imagine you have a graph like.
You are dropping out a little bit, Jono, but
you're all right.
We got you again.
We got you.
Okay, so imagine you have a graph like this, which is kind of like a big hump thing. Okay.
All right, I can imagine a good hump. Got it.
A good hump. Okay. So usually, with technology, what happens is you have at the beginning of the hump, you have a series of early adopters. You have people who get on board
right away,
and then you have this kind of period in the middle, which is the period to mass adoption, and this is called the chasm. And it's basically all from early adoption to mass adoption. It's all the little nits and the niggly little things.
Right.
Big glaring things that are missing from a particular product. Our goal is to basically get over that chasm. So, because we're never going to get to the mass market essentially unless we do that. So Unity was born out of a series of discussions with the Canonical design team and the IoTana community around what kind of things need fixing to essentially get over that chasm. And I think that's what we've done. We've delivered essentially a first cut of it. Now there was Unity that was deployed into the Ubuntu Netbook edition back in Maverick. And I think the reviews I saw of that was that the design seems okay, but it's slow as hell.
It was really brutally slow. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It was installed on my netbook. It was completely unusable for me.
Yeah.
And so some changes had to be made from a technical perspective to implement those designs for Natty. And it was 6 months of really intense development work. One thing I've said to a bunch of people is whatever people's perspectives are on Natty and whatever people's perspective, if there's one thing I'm 100% confident is that everyone who put their brick in the wall to contribute to Natty really worked their socks off. I mean, it was a brutal...
Getting Unity off the ground for this release it's a huge achievement when you think about just how long a desktop environment is generally, takes to get developed at this point.
It is impressive that you guys actually managed to ship with Unity because, I kind of put my flag in the sand about 3 months ago. I'm like, they're not shipping with Unity.
Why don't...
that's just not happening. That's just the stupidest idea. Unity could be awesome, but there's just no way they're going to pull that off. And you guys actually did pull off generally what you guys kind of set out to do, so that is pretty impressive.
But along those lines, and Jono, I want to ask you this, and we might hang up on you and call you back if it drops too much more, but I think we're doing okay now. If Unity wasn't, if people look at Unity now and say maybe it wasn't completely ready, would there have been harm in shipping it as a secondary desktop, or was the goal to try to get as many people using it as possible up front? Because I kind of think that sometimes we have a tendency to make the jump to a new technology too soon, like Pulse Audio comes to mind, things like that.
Pulse Audio does come to mind.
So I'm wondering, it's maybe like a secondary desktop session or something.
I think it was important to ship it for a few reasons. One is one of the hardest things that we have in the Ubuntu world is that we have two classifications of release, really. You've got releases like Ubuntu 11.04 and Ubuntu 11.10, which are regular 6 monthly releases, and then we have these LTSs that come out every 2 years.
Right.
Now the LTSs are the big daddies when it comes to releases. They're the ones that are going to be deployed into enterprises. They're most enterprises are not going to upgrade every 6 months. They're going to upgrade every 2 years.
Absolutely, yeah.
Right.
So we have this kind of evolution of going from release to release. One thing I think we do a not very good job at in Canonical is distinguishing between the merits of those particular types of releases. I mean, some people say, well, you should kind of refer to the regular 6-monthly releases as development releases, and then the LTSs are like the main releases. But then it kind of takes away from the stability and the change in those 6-monthly releases.
Right.
So the reason why I think it was important to bring Unity in 11.04, and the reason why I supported it when Mark proposed it to the engineering management team, was that we drop it in and gives us a full year to really rock on it and sheen it ready for the next LTS release.
Yeah,
because if we deployed it into 11.10, I think the problem is that you'd essentially half the amount of sheening time. Now you could arguably put it in and put it as a secondary desktop, but no one would use it. I mean, people would maybe play with it, but it wouldn't get the level of eyeballs it required. So
Jono,
the risky move was...
I don't mean to harsh on you right there, but I'm not going to use it anyway.
No, and that's fine.
One of the things I want to pull back, I think you're totally 100% spot on. You guys got to get it out there early. You guys got to get it polished for the big long-term support releases. Honestly, that's the right way to do it. Like a lot of people have mentioned making the secondary desktop. I think you guys did it the right way. My bigger concern is that it feels like it's it feels like a very uncomfortable place currently for the pro users, for the people who are very comfortable with where Ubuntu's been.
Yeah.
I mean, Ubuntu's been around for a couple of years, and honestly, I mean, you look at the charts, you look at the absolutely meteoric rise of Ubuntu in market share. I mean, DistroWatch, I know, is not the end all be all of numbers, but it's the only way we can really compare things semi-accurately. And the growth of Ubuntu is just stellar. Plus Linux Mint and other Ubuntu-based derivatives, and it's amazing.
Yeah, they're rocking.
And most of that is the GNOME 2X series of UI. I mean, that's most of what people are really using. And that's what we're used to. That's what we've been able to kind of expand upon. We become power users at this environment. And now we have something completely new. And it's something new that's not built for us. And I think a lot of people, myself included, feel really, really pissed off about the fact that it's not for us. And I think Unity as well as GNOME 3 are amazing UIs. I think they've done amazing things. And, when we did our GNOME 3 review, I said very specifically that I hate GNOME 3, but I don't want them to take my criticism to heart. I want them to keep doing what they're doing.
They're not making it for you.
Because they're not making it for me.
Yeah.
And I feel like Unity's the same way, and I hate that. I hate that it's not for me. What... From your standpoint, and this doesn't even have to be an official Ubuntu standpoint or canonical standpoint, but from your standpoint, what is the right way to go going forward for pro users? Do we really just like plow through it on Unity and try and make it and submit like change requests and the like? Do we stick back to GNOME 2 until maybe Unity might be ready for us? What do we do as pro users?
It's a tough call.
What are you doing? I think
a lot of it
on
is
Unity right now.
Yes, I've been running Unity since pretty much since it first dropped into a development in the Maverick cycle.
Oh, okay.
Hardcore.
That's a long time.
Yes, that's hardcore. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I think the some of the criticisms that you've raised regarding how suitable it is for real Linux enthusiasts, real power users, people who want to tweak their desktops in different ways, are completely reasonable. It is less. The main feedback that I've seen in the 11.04 reviews is that it is less configurable than GNOME, and I think that is completely reasonable feedback. And to a reasonable degree, that was actually pun intended by design. It was to make sure that the core components of Unity were functional. So that's working, because what the primary responsibility in the 11.04 cycle was to deliver something that works. There may be less of it, but it works.
And that's a solid way to go. And I mean, I've figured watching the development cycle that a lot of these features that I'm missing or whatever will work their way back in, but some of them kind of feel like they prevent me from using it now. Like, I'm a pretty heavy, I know this is a stupid thing, but I'm a pretty heavy applet user. Yeah. I have a ton of different applets that I use, like the remote desktop ones and things like that. Those are all just part of my daily workflow that are just not even an option for me right now.
Yeah, and I think that part of the interesting change that's happening in Ubuntu is also something I'm starting to see a little bit in Fedora as well. There's been, in the Fedora community, there's been a lot of discussion about, there's been some uncertainty around around GNOME Shell as an example, and there was this we want our OS back kind of thing that was going on.
Yeah.
And essentially what it is it's this dichotomy between a group of people who want to really simplify the desktop experience so it's designed for mums and dads of the world, and then there's experience that's really designed around the needs of a Linux enthusiast, so a lot more configurable. You can choose which side your Windows buttons goes on, all that kind of stuff. And
Yes.
to me, it's not going to be one or the other. It's what
Some sort of happy middle ground kind of a thing.
viewpoint that it's.
Oh boy.
Well, I've always been of the viewpoint that it's easier to deliver an operating system that is simple out of the box, and then to layer that complexity and configurability on top of it.
I agree with that.
to the other
As
way
you
around.
want it.
Yeah,
Sure.
that makes sense. Yeah.
And I think that what we're going to do with we're going to get to a point, like even now today, you can install like a typical Ubuntu system. I think a lot of hardcore Linux is out of the box way less configurable than.
Oh boy.
Hold on a second, Jono.
John, we'll call you right back.
All right, so before we had a whole bunch of random technical difficulties, thank you, Skype. You made mention that really, going forward, we need to make a UI for mom and dad. Mom and dad, you've said this like 2 or 3 times now. You've mentioned the phrase mom and dad. I want to bring up something here.
iPad, because that's where I think Mom
We
and
are
Dad
pro
going.
users, and we are alive right now.
And I want to ask you this.
Hold on.
All right.
Mom and dad are old, and they're going to die soon.
Well, I think Mom and Dad are going to get an iPad before they're going to get a Unity machine, to be honest with you.
I say screw mom and
I don't
dad.
think that's a good thing, but I just think that's more realistic what's going to happen to that market that we're trying to go with on this kind of stuff. I'm just saying, I wonder if we're going after a market that is already going to be filled by another product that suits better to beginner
I think
users.
what we need to do, like one thing I've said to a few people is, my view is that what you need to do is, there's no reason why we can't target all users. I'm not
Right.
saying that we should target mum and dad, much to the chagrin of Linux enthusiasts. That would be a bad thing. Our community, the community that fuels Ubuntu is Linux enthusiasts. It's people like us. And we shouldn't turn our backs on Linux enthusiasts whatsoever. I think the challenge is this, right? If we release Ubuntu and we optimize it for people who want configurability, it will make it a less usable environment, because one thing we've seen in user testing over and over again is that people trip over options, things get screwed up, they turn their backs on free software, or they turn their backs on that particular system. And we don't want them to turn their backs on free software. To me, the biggest failure of Ubuntu is if someone tries it and they decide, I'm not going to use this Linux thing ever again. So what I think we need to do is we need to deliver a system that is really simple out of the box, but make the configurability a really easy component to fit on top of it. To me, it's the equivalent of going out and buying a Ford Fiesta car and then tricking it out with alloy wheels and putting a spoiler on the back and all that kind of stuff.
Which you have to do. Right.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's not uncommon to do that. I think we're in a position today where we have the opportunity to do that, where we can target both sets of users. Now, there is going to be a certain demographic of Linux enthusiasts who don't want us to target mums and dads. I mean, there is, we're not wanting to offend some people, but there is a certain elitism in our communities about only wanting. And I fundamentally disagree with that, because I think. We talk about freedom, and one of the most important elements of freedom is that everybody can enjoy it, not just people who know what Emacs is. And, it's important that you don't... That's the reason why I like Linux today, is because when I got involved, 12, 13 years ago, I'm sure it was the same as with you guys. It was you had to really invest yourself into it to really get the most out of it.
Oh, yeah.
So I think we can target both, and I think where... a lot of the feedback towards 1104 has been completely reasonable in terms of the fact that it isn't as configurable as it should be, and I think we do need to provide that configurability, and I think we need to support both communities equally well.
And do you feel that, with the amount of time we've got between now and realistically, let's say 1204, between now and the next long-term support release, is there enough time in there to make it so that the current Unity is so configurable that people who are used to GNOME 2 and the GNOME 2 interface that shipped in Ubuntu 10.10 can move over and be happy with it?
I don't see why not. I mean, I put it this way, in 1 6-month cycle, the Ayatana development team essentially rebuilt Unity from scratch, and there is definitely a few bugs here and there. I'm not going to deny it.
It is impressive work, though.
I mean, we can't drive them like that for every cycle. One thing that's been made fairly clear for the next cycle is that this next cycle is going to be about fit and finish. It's going to be about fixing these bugs, about refining. There is definitely some, like, I'll give you an example. One personal gripe I have with Unity, I think it's hard to find the files place. Yeah, the files lens. You know, you put your mouse onto the launcher, you slide it down, you find the little icon, you click on it, the thing pops up, and then you can launch your applications. It's not discoverable enough in my mind. It needs to be more discoverable. And I think there's lots of little things like that we'll end up fixing. I think we'll get there eventually, and I think this is going to be one of those releases. Every so often we pump out a release where we do something dramatically new, and it's what I'd refer to as a patience release. You know, it's like, okay, it tides us over for 6 months, but it seals a foundation for greater things in the future, and I think we're all certainly in a 1204 when it comes. And
I wouldn't want any Linux desktop. I mean, sometimes I'll actually critique that sometimes it doesn't feel like enough changes. So finally we got something big, and I guess, but along the lines of changes is, I know what we've kind of mentioned as a concern on the Linux Action Show is, so we've got Unity now, and then we know coming along pretty soon is Wayland, which is also going to be a pretty big dramatic change to the desktop. Do you think at least
technologically?
Yeah. And you got to imagine driver issues are going to be there and things like that, because we're replacing X11 basically, and you got to figure that that's a lot of change in a compressed amount of time for Ubuntu, and there could be some hits to the reputation if there's setbacks or stability issues and things like that. Is you guys talking about that internally, and is there concern about that?
Yeah, I mean, So there is definitely a strong sense of making sure that we don't bet the farm. You know, that we have to make sure that, so it's interesting. There's been a big thing raging on recently about there's been a lot of pressure on Adobe to release Photoshop for Linux. Right. You guys have seen this, right?
Yeah.
And there's this thread on the forums, I was reading it earlier on today, where this Adobe employee is basically saying, well, the reason why we're not bringing Photoshop to Linux is because there isn't the volume there. There isn't the number of people that we're going to purchase it.
Right.
And the investment in the development of the port. But then, so people start probing on it, and then he goes on and he starts saying, also, you know, there's not good, the color support is bad, the printing support is bad, you know, there's 6 different toolkits you can build it with, and it's frankly bullshit. I mean,
that's the same stuff we've heard for years.
That's just making stuff up, honestly. That's excuses.
And there is some honesty to some of the critique, but there is a lot of FUD.
Yeah.
And
or just a lack of understanding of the technologies on their part. And I could see that maybe to them from the outside, it seems like there's a lot of options because you don't know which ones are sort of the ones that have taken hold and things like that, perhaps. So perhaps that's a challenge. But yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah. But, you know, I think what it demonstrates, though, is that his perspective was that Linux never innovates and never changes. It basically sticks to the set of technologies and that people don't want to change. I mean, we were stuck with X386 for years as a good example of this.
Yeah, we were.
The thing I'm excited about with Linux in general, not just Ubuntu, is that we're not afraid of saying this piece of plumbing isn't working these days. And, you know, we joke about Pulse Audio, but credit to Lennart, who is an ardent criticizer of Ubuntu, but, you know, he went out there and he changed it. You know, Scott James Remnant, who wrote Upstart, is another good example of that. The Xorg team, you know, the LibreOffice team.
The LibreOffice team is our most recent example. That's a good point.
The responsibility of a distribution is to make sure that we keep our eye on these innovations and we bring them into the distro when it makes sense. And I have confidence that we'll do that. The Wayland thing to me is like, it's a red herring. Everyone's been banging on about Wayland. I do these Q&A video casts every Wednesday. People are always asking me about Wayland.
Yeah.
Wayland is so uninteresting for end users. It's almost biblical.
It's more than it's a big hit from the engineering side. And, you know, that's more than anything else. So, you know, I think so Unity is interesting. I mean, and Ubuntu 11.04, because of that, is a very interesting release. I think what is freaking more people out than anything else, the fact that everything is changing so much right now throughout Linux. It's not just with Ubuntu. So when I'm sitting down and I install a new distro every week because of the show, and even despite having tried just every stupid random distro under the sun, I don't know right now what distro I want to be running. So I mean, I make software that runs on Ubuntu. It's in the Ubuntu store, and I of course I'm going to have an Ubuntu desktop for testing that. But if I didn't have that right now, what would I be running? Well, I don't really like to use Unity right now. Maybe one day it'll be there. And GNOME 3 pisses me off to all get out. I'm not comfortable under KDE 4.6, even though I really think they've done an awesome job with it. And so it's coming back down to, like, where does it leave me? We even looked at like Xmonad and all sorts of random window managers recently, where we're just like, dude, this is great, but it's not for me. And I mean, I could go right now. I'm looking at the 11.04 releases, and the version of 11.04 I'm the happiest with is Xubuntu with LXDE. And I'm realizing it's because it's the most traditional version. It's the most similar to what we had in 10.10 and prior. And I'm realizing that I don't know that if it's because it just feels more comfortable or because it legitimately is a more powerful way for a person like me to work. I'm not 100% sure of that at this point.
And it's funny because people go on, people who are new to Linux often will say, why do you have KDE and GNOME? Why don't you just have one environment? Why do you have all of these distributions? Yeah. And this is a reason why this is good, there's kind of the almost cliche of people saying, that's it, I'm moving to blah, 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 and so long as that's free software, I'm completely cool with that. Like I said, to me, the disservice is if somebody uses Ubuntu and they say, that's it, I'm going back to Windows, or I'm going back to Mac OS X. That, to me, that's when I feel like, okay, we need to
change something. Yeah, we screwed up.
But I think the thing is as well is that I've noticed that there's two types of feedback as well in the Unity thing to me is a bit of a misnomer. Unity to me is 10% of the Ubuntu experience. It's a small piece. You start apps, you find files. Whoop-do, right? It's a new desktop environment. Design is emotional. People get emotionally attached.
Yeah.
Design changes. People are like, what the hell's going on? And we see this all the time, all over the place. Surprising that there is an emotional reaction to any kind of design change. We saw that in KDE with KDE 4. We've seen it with GNOME 3, and but there's also it's funny because I think that in the Linux community, we often judge the experience, the perceived experience of what the mass market's going to need by our own expectations as well. So as an example, most people, I'd argue, and I don't know this for certain, but most people I think just couldn't care less about whether it's Unity or GNOME or whatever else.
Probably
so long as they can find their stuff.
Especially if you're talking average users.
Yeah, like a good example is George Castro, who works on my team at Canonical. He set his girlfriend up with Natty, and he said, here, check it out. And she got on it, and George is all like, I don't know if you guys have met him before, but George is like just this bustling ball of energy, and he was really wanting to say, hey, check out this, but he wanted her to find it, and the first thing she did was open Firefox and just went to Gmail, right? She just started doing her stuff.
Yeah,
and
I know.
Like, what about
that really is like half of everything on
and
desktop
Facebook,
now. Yeah, that's true.
And she was like, George said, what about all this and all about this, and she was like, yeah, that's kind of cool. I think it's important for us not to forget that there is the kind of expectations that we have in the Linux community, I think, are not necessarily always the ones that are the
right.
Doesn't mean we need to discount them.
Yeah.
That Brian, because you want to have a greater level of configurability in your desktop, that doesn't mean that's not a valuable thing that we should build into Ubuntu.
Right.
I think the second component is like I say, design is emotional and things change. When things change, people usually freak out about the change. A good example of this is, I'm sure you guys have probably got like an Android phone or something like that. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure when you first got it, there was a bunch of things and then you're like, how the hell do I do this? How do I do this? And what do I do? And you probably just thought, okay, took a few days, but then you kind of got used to it, whatever, you get on with things. It's the same if you buy a new TV, a DVD player, a Blu-ray, whatever. Yeah. The things that we're really passionate about, I think that's when we have lots of opinions. So we see on OMG Ubuntu people who get very opinionated about the launcher or which side of the Windows buttons go on and all this kind of stuff, because we're fans. We're fans of the
because these are the sorts of things that are important to us. These matter in our lives. Mm-hmm. So what would you recommend to someone like me, who would you recommend to the pro users what they do over the course of the next year? I mean, if Unity is going to get to the point where it's customizable enough for the pro users that are used to Ubuntu, that are used to SUSE and all these other distros classically, without Unity, what do we do for the next year? Because, I mean, come on, we can't just sit on the long-term support release. I mean, the big major app upgrades are tied to the distro releases. And of course you can, let's like Firefox. You can install Firefox 4 on Ubuntu 6. That's just a horrible idea, but it is technically possible. So, but we're not going to do that. We're going to upgrade every 6 months, no matter what distro it is. What do we do? What would you do if you were giving us that advice?
Well, I've always been a big fan of divide and conquer. So, I think there's a good example. 11 configurable release of Unity ever. I mean, there's going to be more configurable.
Sure, that
no
makes
doubt
sense.
about that. I don't know what that configurability will be, but I'm sure that we'll get there. But Unity is an open source free software project. Everybody can contribute. In the last cycle, in the 1104 cycle, we had 17 new contributors code into Unity, and I've tasked George with continuing to grow that community and get more people involved.
Sure.
And I think that we should encourage people who are, for want of a better word, power you to contribute features, develop our users to contribute features to fill in those gaps.
So just to stop you right there. So what would you say to individuals, since GNOME 3 and Unity hit like they might as well have come out on the same day. I mean, they hit at the same time, and part of that was planned on one side. But it happened. So now we've got these two desktop environments that are going to be vying for really the same audience, the GNOME users that exist right now, which, I mean, really is in large part Ubuntu users, because Ubuntu's kind of the GNOME king. So as a developer, as a power user, as a tester, as a technical writer, it's very difficult to decide which way you go. I mean, do you go with Unity and Canonical, or do you go with GNOME 3? And
are you guys
way
putting yourself
go,
on an island here potentially? Like if
that's what I'm worried about.
If the rest of the Linux ecosystem sort of rallies behind, the GNOME side of it goes behind GNOME 3, what happens with you guys? Do you guys kind of end up loner island?
I think my personal take on this is not the perspective of Canonical, is that a lot of politics in the Linux world, and we've seen a lot of politics that have gone on with GNOME and Ubuntu and all the rest of it. And I think at the end of the day, users will decide. We've got a variety, and I think users will decide what is best for them. This is the reason why I was saying earlier on that Unity to me is only a same way that GNOME 3, it's interesting how people refer to GNOME 3 and compare it to Ubuntu. GNOME 3 is just a component. People don't necessarily talk about Fedora or OpenSUSE and Ubuntu, which I think is a fairer assessment, because it's the desktop environment, it's the selection of apps that you've got, it's how you sync your shit to the cloud, it's all that kind of stuff that I think is important. And I think people will install those systems. The great thing about free software, I think, is that you can, all of us can try a range of different distributions. I think a lot of new people to Linux will install Ubuntu, they'll install Fedora, and they'll probably install OpenSUSE, and they'll pick
their favorite.
Yeah, they'll pick what works for them.
And they'll pick their favorite one. I don't think that... I'm not too worried about Ubuntu becoming an island, because I have enough confidence, and maybe I'm just drinking the Kool-Aid, but I have enough confidence that the technology and the solutions that we're focusing on are of sufficient interest to everybody. And while I think that we will lose some people along the way,
sure,
in the same way that we already have. I mean, if you compare Warty, way back when, to Natty, it's completely different.
Yeah, it is almost a night and day difference, yeah.
Even if you compare Warty and Maverick, and there is a certain demographic of people who, frankly, don't want it to be quite that simple, and that's cool, and we will lose some people along the way, but I think we'll also pick up a ton of people for whom Linux was never accessible to them beforehand because they just couldn't figure it out.
So just to kind of come back this, so where do people like me go? I mean, do we stick with the 6-month releases and use Unity as our desktop to try and make it better and will generally grow increasingly infuriated throughout those 6 months until we get to that point? Or do we move to, an XFCE based distro? Do we go to Ubuntu? Do we go to KDE? Do we stick back with the old long-term support release and just use GNOME 2 and wait it out? I mean, what?
I think you're asking him.
What do we do?
I think you're asking him a briefs or boxers kind of question, man. It's.
But I need to know if I'm using briefs or boxers.
You got to figure it out, man.
No, I think imagine I'm you, Brian, right? And I'm just covered in these dazzling good looks and
okay,
slight bad.
It's a stretch, but I'm with you so far.
What I'd recommend you did is install Ubuntu and then you customize it for your needs. Everything that you want to do, whether it's running Natty with so it's going to be easy to run. Like GNOME Shell was a pain to run on.
Yeah, GNOME Shell on Natty was a pain. Yeah,
it's a pain, and that's going to go away with Oniric. It's going to be you're going to be able to install GNOME Shell on that release, no problem, because GNOME 3 will be built into it. So you could install the Oniric Ocelot, and you could install. If you don't like Unity, you can install GNOME Shell on there. Oh. You can install XFCE on there. You can install whatever you want. The point I'm making is that I think for all of us, whatever level of enthusiasm we have, whether we're just end users who don't care about computers or whether we're deeply interested in the technology, there's a cutoff point about things that we care about. I personally am really interested in the desktop side of Linux.
Yeah.
I personally don't care about the kernel. I just want it to work. I want my hardware to work. I don't want to be tweaking the kernel at all. But the next layer up is where it gets interesting for me. Apps that's interesting to them. And I think the good thing about Ubuntu is that you can get that level of it just works to the layer that you want, and then you can configure that layer as appropriate. So what I'd recommend you did is that you installed Ocelot, and then you tweaked it, you install the app, change the settings that you want based upon the desktop that you choose, and then I think that would work out pretty well for you. That's what I do if I was in your situation.
And almost more important than all of this, Oniric Ocelot, is that the right way to pronounce that? The 11.10 release? So we had a lot of conversation about this at Linux Fest. We had an entire room full of people, and we mentioned it. We were recording Linux Action Show Live, and everyone just kind of looked at us like, I don't know what that means, and I don't know how to say that.
Yeah.
So Oniric Ocelot is from Jono Bacon.
At every cycle. At every cycle, it gets to that point in the cycle, I'll send Mark an email. It's that point, and I've grown used to I'll send him some suggestions about what I think would be cool, like for the Hardy Heron release. I was really wanting Hungry Hippo.
That would have been great.
And
why don't they let you name all of them, dude?
Yeah, seriously.
I really wanted that. But I've learned that, whatever suggestion I put in there, he pretty much...
Hardy Heron was such a stupid name.
What you got to do,
Hungry
Jono,
Hippo is awesome.
Is you got to divert him now. You got to use your skills to divert him onto the right track. Now it's reverse psychology.
Mark, a terrible name would be Hungry Hippo.
Yeah, exactly.
Here's what we do. The next release after Oniric Ocelot, before Mark comes out and announces it, decide what you want it to be, leak it to us, and we will do an official, not official, we got the inside scoop, here's what it officially is, and we'll get the whole internet talking about that name, and then Mark has no choice.
Brilliant.
Yeah, it doesn't work.
Okay. Now, is there anything else we wanted to chat with John about before we hang up on him?
Well, I'm... mostly what I'm curious about. I mean, obviously, there's going to be a lot of changes in Unity. This is really a V1 project, and it's the first thing out of the gate here. And really, based on that, it's impressive. So, well done to the team for doing that. I still can't stand it, but I'm going to try. I'm going to try and work with you guys to make it better and all that. But going forward, I kind of want to come back for a second to Unity, to GNOME 3, to LXDE, to KDE. I love choice. I mean, choice is great. Choice is one of the cool things that actually drives and makes this show actually worthwhile. There's so much to talk about that we need shows like this to talk about it, to review it all. If we just had one environment, we'd have basically the Windows Action Show. It'd be like, Windows is still the same, and then we'd be off the air because it wouldn't be very interesting. So in that sense, I love it.
Easy show to do, though.
It's an easy show to do, right?
Yeah.
Very easy.
We should think
show.
about that.
We kind of should. We've actually talked about doing a Windows Action show every April Fool's Day since the show started, and we never have. Yeah. We have enough friends at Microsoft. They would totally come on the show and just we'd almost make it real.
That'd be great.
Anyway, totally digressed. So looking at GNOME 3, I very much dislike the way they designed GNOME 3 technologically in a lot of ways. But one of the things they did is the UI is essentially this giant JavaScript mess, which I'm going to get emails for calling it a mess. But, it's very JavaScript heavy. So because of that, it's insanely customizable. So we reviewed GNOME 3, and the default out-of-the-box experience really wasn't for us. But as the more you dig into it, the more you realize, well, it's just a bunch of JavaScript. Everything that seems like their applets, the bar itself, it's just this JavaScript. So it's so easy to customize. So we're already seeing a lot of people submitting patches that do crazy stuff that make it much more old school GNOME-like. So it seems like to me, from the customizable point of view, whether I like it or you guys like it or not, it seems like the GNOME 3 guys have got the lead start in this regard. With Fedora, Fedora's going to be moving to GNOME 3. OpenSUSE is going to be moving to GNOME 3, both in their next releases. The Mint guys are off doing their own thing. I don't know what they're doing, but they're in Mint land.
They're doing GNOME 3.
They're doing GNOME 3, but it's like crazy customized. It's Mint experience GNOME 3. But anyway, so everyone around Ubuntu really is going to GNOME 3. If you look at the DistroWatch charts, the top 5 are all going to GNOME 3, except for Ubuntu's default main release. So I know it's all about choice. I know these projects are open source, and I know you really don't want to look at it as Ubuntu is off on an island. Let's take a step back. Let's just think about Unity, not Ubuntu, because honestly, Ubuntu has Kubuntu and Xubuntu. Obviously, there's all these distros, and even on any of them, you can still install whatever desktop environment you want. Let's just look at Unity here as in terms of adoption. So now, even with if the current market share trends hold with Ubuntu, and Ubuntu doesn't really lose or gain any, Ubuntu's still going to be the number one in terms of, desktop with the default distro. Now that means that Unity will be roughly on par numbers-wise with GNOME 3 implementations. If you add up, Fedora and OpenSUSE and the like, they'll be kind of sitting about on par.
This is distro math. It's hard.
Yeah, so distro math is rough. So now what we're really looking at, and this is, of course, assuming nobody jumps ship, really, or the people that do jump ship in every which direction, everything ends up being the same numbers-wise.
Okay.
So I got to come back to, what is it about Unity? What is it really about Unity that makes Canonical so interested in going that route as opposed to, say, a bunch of patches on top of GNOME 3? Because GNOME 3 really is pretty customizable. I mean, most of the differences from a user experience standpoint in today's V1 versions of both GNOME 3 and Unity can be accomplished essentially in both. But in GNOME 3, it'd be a little easier to tweak to make it look more like Unity. In fact, there are people out there actually making GNOME 3 look and work more like Unity, which, okay. But what... Do you get what I'm trying to kind of going at here? Like, what is it that makes Unity really exciting for you guys? I don't know if I see it yet.
I think I understand the question. I mean, the way I describe it is I've got two tablets. I've got an iPad and a Motorola Zoom.
Sure.
So I've got, the iOS implementation of a tablet operating system, the Motorola Zoom one. And they're both different designed approaches to the same problem. Right? A consumer-grade tablet device. And both have got their strengths and both have got their weakness. The thing that I think, just again, this is me personally, this is Jono at jonobacon.org, not Jono at ubuntu.com. This is my personal take on it as a user. I'm not on the Unity design team, so I didn't design any of it. My job is
You're
to
the
grow
community dude. Yeah. I mean, that's
I'm
different.
The community dude. So, but when you use, putting all proprietary software ideals aside between the two tablet versions, the experience I get when I use the iPad compared to the Zoom is a much cleaner, slicker experience.
Okay.
It feels clean and a bit more minimal and a lot easier to use. It feels more natural and more human to me. I personally today feel like the same could be applied to Unity and to GNOME Shell. I've tried GNOME Shell, and total kudos to the GNOME Shell development team. They have, I was saying how everybody put all that hard work into Natty. I think the same can be also applied to the GNOME Shell team. They really rocked it.
Are you kind of drawing it out?
They did a great job.
GNOME 3 is to Honeycomb what Unity is to iOS?
I think is that
in design terms.
Like just in terms of design, it feels like a kind of a cleaner, what I think is a slicker experience. And part of the reason is that when you boom, there is so many more things to press and to push and to change and to slide.
Yeah.
Whereas with the iPad, it's
more Unity-like in a sense. There's less to do.
Right.
It's this Fisher-Price toy, right? And it is a Fisher-Price toy.
Totally is.
But you know what? It's so much easier to just do the stuff which I want. All I want to do when I'm using tablet is read my email, read a book, and do. And I think that's the analogy. So personally, I'm not interested in who's going to wars. It's all free software. Everyone wins as far as I'm concerned. Like I don't consider Fedora competition. I consider Microsoft and Apple as competition.
Right.
And I'm personally interested in helping to contribute towards beating that competition. The different projects are going to go off, Brian, about why not just add a load of patches to GNOME Shell?
Right.
I think the reason why is that I think you've got some quite different design, a quite different design ethos between the design team working on Shell and the design team working on Unity. And I think the reason why you can see that is in the first version releases that have actually come out. I think that they are design-wise, and again, I don't know anything about design. No one should be listening to me right now. I think that design-wise, they are like...
Dude, you're on the Linux Action Show. We are on year 5, 6. Where are we at right now?
I don't know.
We don't say Ubuntu right, apparently. So, dude, you can have whatever opinion you want right now. It's okay.
Well, seriously, opinion in Lug Radio was never a problem either. So
that's right.
Yeah, but you guys were drunk every episode, I think.
Pretty much. I mean, I think that the proof is in the pudding, and in the design, in what we've seen with the first versions of both environments, I think has been different enough. There's a lot of similarity.
Okay.
The whole fairly similar, but there's tweaks around, and there's different levels of technical perfection in terms of how they've been built.
Yeah.
I think the technical implementation of GNOME Shell is just remarkable. From testing, it's rock solid.
It is.
But from the design perspective, I think they're quite different. And to me, it's like going back to that. Well, why don't the KDE team and the GNOME team just work together on the same environment? It's because there's a different approach to how they want to solve the same problem.
Right.
I personally prefer the clean, slick approach to Unity.
I think actually the main reason that KDE and GNOME don't work together is because if that happened, Aaron Saigo's head would explode. I think is primarily how it works.
It's a space-time continuum.
Yeah, it's a space-time continuum thing.
Yeah.
His head would totally scanners.
Now,
It'd be a very tiny explosion in Canada.
We've kept Jono on for quite a while, so I feel like we should.
We can let you go. Can I ask one more question?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Can I ask one more question?
Hey, I say ask me 5 more.
One of the things that we talked about during our review was the touchscreen experience.
Oh yeah, I'm glad you brought this up.
So I've got a Lenovo S10 3T little netbook tablet convertible thing in it, and I love the little thing. It's great. It's got this little capacitive touchscreen. It's awesome. The out of the box experience with 1104 was actually fairly remarkable on this beast. It was fairly peppy. The touchscreen worked right out of the box. Not multi-touch, but the single touch worked great. But one of the things that struck me was in using Unity, as soon as it came up, the first instinct I have was to touch the dock area, was to touch the bar. So I go to touch it, and I was blown away by it. Immediately responded, had no jittery, and I could start scrolling the things up and down, and it had a little bit of kineticness to it, and it worked really, really great. And then I'm like, dude, touch UI, and I start touching everything. And I realized that was the only piece of the entire UI that really worked as a touchscreen experience. what are you guys' thoughts? I mean, a lot of people have talked about, Unity as kind of like step one in Canonical's master plan of moving to all mobile and portable devices and pads and tablets and everything. I don't know if I'll go so far as to say that simply because I haven't heard it from you guys, but it does seem like the UI is a step towards heavy touch, but not really usable as a touch
Not a
device.
specific commitment yet.
Is that something that you guys want to move towards? Is that something that's being talked about as making Unity really touch happy?
The reason why it's called Unity is the unification of computing experiences, right? It's the idea that
is it really?
I know that's
I've never even thought about why it was called that. You guys could have called it like the Germanic gerbil, and I would have just gone, well, obviously it's supposed to be called that.
With Canonical's history of naming things, I'm just happy it's not obnoxious. Yeah, Unity's, I kind of like it.
I do too. All right, go ahead. Sorry, man.
yeah, I'm
Continue.
pleased that Mark Schull didn't.
Exactly.
It's going to be the name of this new environment.
Right.
Yeah, I mean the idea from what I've from talking to Mark and talking to the design team about what they're trying to achieve here is this environment that can be useful on a touch device as well as on your desktop as well.
Okay.
So for example, the reason why it was deployed at first in netbooks is because it was really designed for netbooks. It was designed to maximize your screen real estate. And I think it works pretty well. Like a terminal maximized in Unity is a beautiful thing to me.
It is.
It actually, a terminal maximized is actually pretty fantastic. Yeah.
Now, before Jono's Skype connection completely explodes, we thought we'd wrap up with him. So, Jono, thanks for coming on and, taking some beatings from us and sharing the...
Always a pleasure.
Ubuntu and the Jono side of the story.
And, and again, one thing that's super cool about not just you guys over at Canonical, but the whole of the GNOME 3 guys, the KDE guys, is we harsh all over everything and we can all still have a nice chit chat about it and talk through the relative merits. And that's incredibly cool because honestly, if we came out and reviewed, like, let's say Windows 7, like we reviewed Ubuntu 11.04, Microsoft would send a hit squad to our house and that would be that.
Yeah. Hey, Jono, before we go, tell people how they can find you online. What's the best way for people to get a hold of you, find more out about what you're doing, stuff like that?
So I probably the best way is probably Twitter or Identica. My username is Jono Bacon, Jono.
Oh, just like the name is spelled. Easy enough.
On
Whoa.
jonobacon.org, where I tend to ramble every so often, but
The home of Jono Bacon, I believe it's titled. Very nice, sir. Yeah, when we'll throw those links in the show notes too. All right, Jono. Well, thanks for coming on the show today and chatting with us.
Thanks, Jono.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.